Great. Good afternoon and welcome to the House Committee on Environment and Energy. This afternoon, we are taking up amendments to S100 and we have Representative Higley with us. Welcome, Representative Higley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, committee. Representative Mark Higley of the Orleans-Lamoille District. Again, usually things come up on you in a hurry. I was looking over S100 and I said, hey, other than from Representative Baumgart's on his story and Digger, looking at large lot size, excessive parking requirements, excessive setback heights limitations are all driving up the costs. I found one other thing that is definitely driving up costs, and that's the new rules that we're going to hear on the 25th regarding the residential energy building standards and the commercial energy building standards. So briefly, I can just go to a lot of the comments and explain what my amendment's trying to do. It's basically postponing action on these rules for both the residential and the commercial for 2 years, which is a lot of what the testimony from different folks, whether it's home builders, architects, even municipal housing authorities are saying about the new rules. So for an example, Huntington Homes talks about a 2015 Department of Public Service study found that only 54% of the newly constructed homes were in compliance with the RBESs of that time. And that was 2 code revisions ago. There's no training, there's no inspection or enforcement. They are looking for the legislature and DPS to create a code program, which would, benefit more implementing these codes. They talked about a 1,800 square foot home built today based on the 2050 RBESs would cost a difference of about $28,000 while saving a mere $1,000 in energy costs a year. Snyder Homes, we believe that the change should be delayed for 2 years. All of our products are permitted through the municipal process and comes under Act 250 regulations, including the requirements to exceed code by at least 10%. We have estimated that the increased cost to meet the code and stretch code for Act 250 projects is over $17,500 per home. The benefits for these future homeowners will not be realized for many, many years. The Vermont Builders and Remodelers Association reports a cost increase of $17,500 to $18,300 per home. I think it is out of line to try to enact these proposed updates without adhering and addressing inspection first. Montpelier Housing Committee talks about their old stock of housing in the city and how expensive it would be for upgrading to some of these regulations, in particular talking about a Green Mountain Power price for switching the current 100 amp service to a 200 amp service for a dwelling unit would be just shy of $4,000. An architect talked about an energy code without enforcement is problematic at best, and the lack of any such enforcement places builders and architects trying to follow the code at a distinct disadvantage to those who don't. Current language in the CBES, that's the commercial codes, appears to require 1 charging station per dwelling unit plus a percentage of other spaces. And the code's language for EV capable seems to require that all the infrastructure but for the actual charger itself must be in place. This has a very large impact on upfront construction costs. I had asked Ledge Council to help me out with a concern some in here addressed, and that's if these new codes go into effect, and let's say they have a contract for a project a year in advance, how will that affect their project? And the answer that I got back from Ledge Council was basically each time the residential building energy standards are amended by the commissioner, the amended RBESs shall become effective upon a date specified in the adopted rule and a date that shall not be less than 3 months after the date. Persons commencing residential construction before the effective date shall have the option of complying with the applicable provisions of the earlier or the amended RBESs. After that effective date, though, the original or amended RBSs, any person commencing residential construction shall comply with the most recent version of RBESs. So again, there's multiple reasons for postponing action on these for the 2 years. Not only to have some of these projects that are already maybe being considered to stay at their current contracted prices that they gave. It's another thing too that these standards, as far as from what LCAR can do, Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, which myself and Representative Baumgartz are on, we don't have a lot of latitude in what we can do. A lot of times, even if we say no to the rules, the agency can enact them anyway. And the only thing that we can do is do what I'm trying to do here through legislation, which would say that this would be postponed. Or we can make some suggestions that would come back to the Committee of Jurisdiction to try to resolve. And that's about it as far as what I'm trying to do.
Thank you. We are aware of the enforcement issue, and it's addressed in this bill as a study, figure out how to do it. So we've heard about that issue with the RVs and CVs from the builders over time. I guess we also know we're heading in the direction of needing to, weatherize retroactively, which is much more expensive than while you're building a building. And I don't know, that's just my immediate responses. And just doing any of it up front ultimately costs less than trying to have to go back and go to it. So I'm definitely acknowledging and hearing that we need to up our game on consistently having, buildings, having enforcement. And like I said, it's in there. Do members have questions, Representative Higley? Not seeing any.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Representative Sibilia.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, we have a
Sorry.
question. We have a question. Representative Sibilia has a question.
Just, again, what is the harm from not going with your amendment? Who's harmed?
Anybody that's going to construct housing over the next 2 years is going to see an increased cost to as much as $28,000 based on these requirements in the new RBESs and CBESs. And the other harm is, we'd mentioned about some of the requirements upgrading, whether it's insulation or not. There's a lot of testimony in here as well from folks that say that this is a bad idea from the industry standards, as far as they haven't really looked at it close enough to increase this R value in the way that they're doing it. It could even be harmful to home construction if done improperly.
So follow-up is just, so in 2 years, that is fixed by?
Part of it will be, hopefully there'll be a reprieve from 2 years to get some more housing stock out there a little bit cheaper. And then maybe the committee in the next 2 years can take up some of the consideration for enforcement and education around what's required of these building energy standards.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Because right now, from a lot of the testimony that's in these rules, say that it's too soon. It's too soon to enact them all.
And that's the testimony you're reading from was from the public input on the rules?
Right.
Representative Pat, did you have a hand up?
Yeah, I just as a comment, I understand some of the issues around this, and I do follow this a bit, but it just feels like this just kicks the can down the road, and that's my concern, because having these standards like this is overdue. And that's my concern.
Okay.
Thank you. Do members have questions about the language that's drafted in the amendment for Ellen? And Morris?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm reading section 23, and we're just creating the Building Energy Code study committee, right? So they're going to bring that back to us. I'm just wondering what the harm is in putting a guardrail on here, roadblock, if you will, for implementation until we get the study back. And that would, I'm assuming we wouldn't have that back until 24-ish for the legislature to respond to it. And then if we're going to implement that, or the recommendations of the study committee are moved forward, and we would still have a year warning before they, I would assume, before they would be implemented. Would that not be logical? No, they wouldn't be implemented the day the report comes back.
Well, we've been consistently tying our energy code to the broader RBs and CBs updates for, I don't know how long, for a long time. How long, Ellen, do you know?
Since 2011.
Yeah, so just this iterative process has been ongoing.
Sure, but what is the process now for this bill if it is passed and the implementation of the RBCs? There's got to be a time.
Well, as
It's not going to happen immediately. The study committee is going to come back.
no, the study committee is looking at the issues of as the ongoing updates have been happening.
So if this is passed, when would the new building codes go into effect?
It's separate from our bill, entirely separate. It's already happening in statute. The Higley Amendment would interrupt what's already happening in statute. And about to happen at Elkhart. Representative Smith.
And that amendment will save home builders quite a bit of money. Am I correct?
I don't know about, he read the testimony, but I would say like this committee is working really hard to get folks to use less energy. We have a moment right now where we have a lot of dollars that are about to build houses. And I would suggest that now is actually not the time to step away, but it's actually the time to lean in with all the money that we have.
Well,
It's an unusual time to actually meet the building codes.
I don't know what kind of a time frame we've got here, but I mean, I know it's urgent. But Mark's a builder, has been for a long time, and I think he knows what he's talking about.
Representative Baumgart.
You know, I'm very reluctant to step into the board's process for one thing. And that happens in an extraordinary circumstance. And this just next iteration of rules is not an extraordinary situation. And to my way of thinking, so I'd be very reluctant to, you know, after they've done everything they're supposed to do, the way that they're supposed to do it, to step in. And we've taken zero testimony on this. We've had some, you know, this is a major change. And frankly, the Senate hasn't even thought about this. The Senate will something totally that could be a little bill. But I think for the legislature to step in to something that is routine, because this is routine, keeping up with these requires, in my view, something extraordinary. And I'm not sure we have something extraordinary in front of us. And we've taken zero testimony. And I don't like doing the work without taking testimony. So that's what I do. And by the way, I also had Representative Higley left out one of the other things that happens at Elkhart, which is that very often, if issues get raised, the department, whatever it may be, steps back from whatever the timeline. It is true that they can ignore Elkhart if they want to, does shift the burden, which was they wanted that, but they also don't want to do it. We just went through a process. We didn't want the agency, I won't go into it, where we ended up working with them for another 6 months before the rule got implemented and it all worked out fine. So there is that third avenue or fourth, whichever, however many examples he gave, that is kind of negotiation. I have got no idea whether we'll end up with that at that point with this round in Elkhart, but that's also an option that happens frequently.
Representative Logan Sethwitz and then Sevilla.
Thanks. It does seem to me that though the upfront costs that he's describing are, costs that, but that they're the kind of costs that lower costs on a monthly basis for years and years and years beyond. So it just seems like over the life cycle of the home being built, it's not an increased cost. It's increased upfront. I think people recognize that that's what they're paying for.
Sakowitz.
Yeah, and going with that theme, I would further say that, those figures that we got were from industry. And, typically industries, they don't like to be told what to do, and they don't like to change, and for lots of reasons that are totally understandable. And that industries, across many industries have a long history of really overestimating how much it's really going to cost them to comply with all sorts of different efficiency measures. And so I would say that without a whole lot more testimony, we shouldn't even consider.
Representative Pat. Oh, no, sorry, Sevilla, then Pat.
So in the interest of clarity and consistency, I want to disagree that we would only interrupt the rules process under extraordinary circumstances. I think we've had to have this discussion several times with the administration on different types of bills that in fact the legislature can quite simply come in and take an action that negates rules process. Having said that, I don't think that we have received the proper amount of testimony. I would concur with the chair that we are taking extraordinary actions in this committee to try and reduce thermal energy use. And there is a lot of funding that is going out into our communities. And so for that reason, I would not be able to support this.
Representative Pat, then Tory.
I just want to add that in addition to the energy savings and reduced costs that comes from that, as we've heard in discussions about the weatherization program retrofitting, but it's also true in new construction. There are significant health benefits as compared to not doing it, and that's harder to quantify than energy benefits, but that's not included in the numbers we heard.
Just, I agree with what everyone's been saying, and Representative Higley mentioned some of the back and forth in the building community around best practices for insulating walls. And it's highly complicated, and I wouldn't want to touch it in this setting. Personally.
Any other further discussion?
I just want to answer my question earlier. Looking at the Building Energy Standard update, says that they have a target effective date near the end of 2023. That's when the new codes will potentially go into effect.
Yeah, I think that's the
End of
rule
the year.
that they're talking about.
Yeah.
All right, so this would be a straw poll vote. Try and keep it easy for our brains. Everyone who supports the Higley amendment, please raise your hand. 2 in favor. Everyone who finds it unfavorable, please raise your hand. 9 for Representative Morris. Did you vote? Yeah. Okay. That's for you.
Damn right.
All right, Representative Small, would you please join us?
Thank you. Having deja vu sitting back at this table. Good afternoon, everyone. Representative Taylor Small for the record. Dare I say my amendment before you is simpler than yesterday's. It is simply a date change that would be impacting section 3, the limitations on municipal bylaws, expanding that to emergency shelters. This version of the amendment does not amend the definition at all. It simply changes the implementation date to July 1st of this year. And this is intentional to align with the end of the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program and empowering municipalities with all of the tools to be able to address this oncoming crisis. And one thing that I also developed since yesterday is that the Agency of Human Services, and in particular the Department for Children and Families, is in support of this amendment and the implementation date of July 1 due to that end of the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program.
All right. And so yesterday, members, we did take this up and actually agreed to a September 1, which was in your amendment yesterday,
Yes.
8. And so we agreed to that yesterday, Representative Lee.
Did we have a formal decision-making process yesterday?
We had a consensus agreement.
We also had different language around that. I mean, I'm fine with pushing it back to September 1st. But I think especially with DCF's support and the support of the Vermont Coalition to End Homelessness that governs that governs every shelter in the state presently, as far as I know, if they receive any HUD funding. I would also support July 1.
Representative Bongartz.
So just to put this out, the bill, the way it passed out of here, which had the language for shelters, trying to get to the same place, gave towns a year and a half to modify their bylaws, go through the process of figuring out which district or districts and everything else that comes with it. You have the rate goal vote coming at us with the ending of the program. But my concern about, so yesterday we kind of got to September 1st, and part of the reason for that was to at least give towns the opportunity to produce interim bylaws before this goes into effect, because under effect July 1st, towns will not have time to, I can't imagine they'd have time to adopt interim bylaws. And so I guess my inclination is to leave it at what we talked about yesterday, September 1st, because I think we have to give towns the ability to at least scramble and get interim bylaws in place. So that's my opinion.
Representative Sibilia.
What happens if they are not able to get interim bylaws in place?
So what we reached out to Planners Association, and what would happen is if they did not currently in their zoning bylaw have emergency shelters as a use in at least one of their zoning districts, my understanding is that it would be allowed in their whole town. So they wouldn't be able to guide it. Is that correct, Ellen?
Ellen Czajkowski, Office of Legislative Counsel. So it would depend at least partially on what the DRB's decision was on any application that came to them. And so potentially, yes, it could be any part of the town. I do think it would come down to what a DRB decided if they were reviewing an application, and if they rejected it by saying we don't currently have a district provided for, then the statute would override. So yes, potentially that's what could happen.
Karen, did you have something to add? Oh, Seth,
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would strongly urge you to stick with September. We're really just a few weeks away from July 1. And local governments don't always move quickly. So we would urge you stay with September 1. If a town doesn't have anything addressing emergency shelters now, the statute would rule. And I think that without a bylaw, you would actually have to permit a emergency shelter anywhere. We are also disappointed that the language that was discussed yesterday regarding putting some kind of parameters for support services isn't included. I think that's pretty key as well. Thank you.
members, questions for Representative Small? Do you have anything you want to say? Any additional?
Oh, no, recognizing that zoning bylaws are not my background. So grateful for your work in this. But what I have learned a lot from Legislative Council is that it is I believe a 2-week process to be able to implement bylaws within municipalities. Interim bylaws, thank you. That's why Legislative Council does this work and not me. So recognizing again, the impending crisis that's coming to communities and giving them that preparation. So I really appreciate your committee's review of this amendment.
I'm sorry.
Karen Hall.
I think that that's not quite accurate. A town will need to have a proposed bylaw. They'll need to warn that. They'll need to have a public hearing. They need to observe the open meeting law and planning commissions don't always meet 5 days a week or even twice a month sometimes.
In the
So
summer.
it's going to take some time.
Representative Smith.
I'm thinking that it's a 45-day window to have a public hearing.
I think that with respect to interim bylaws, a little bit shorter maybe, but you still
Yeah.
have to have a public hearing and you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Further discussion, members? Representative Stebbins.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand the desire to align it with the date of the GA program ending. So definitely hear the concern about the timing for towns. So I'm not being very helpful, but I am very glad it's no longer December 2024.
Other members? Representative Scalia.
Effective difference between July and September, like what will we see? What do you think we'll see? The difference between July and September, both of you really. So if we go with July versus September, so what did?
I think September is really almost a courtesy to local governments to say this is a little bit of time for you to get your house in order with this new mandate.
But if we went with July, what's the worst case scenario?
Our members will call you.
Benefits
What
for
is September? What is the worst case scenario?
worst case for September would just be delaying opening shelters in various municipalities. That is it. It's just the delay.
But not all shelters.
Not all shelters, no. If there are bylaws already in place, then it would not impact expansion there. And of course, benefit aligning with the. Excellent.
Representative Logan.
Thanks. I know at least two proposed shelter projects that this statutory change would actually increase the likelihood of a zoning permit being issued for those 2 projects. So that's a matter of 2 months while we're having an emergency shelter crisis for 2 municipalities. I'm having a hard time imagining the worst case scenario options. We haven't heard a specific worst case scenario. Kind of example given for starting this July 1 versus September 1. I just haven't, I hear worry. I understand the pressure to try to put interim bylaws in place in a very short period of time. It's also going to be very stressful to try to find housing when there is no housing available. And then the communities that do have social services already available and public transit and open parkland are going to be overwhelmed, just absolutely overwhelmed. And we're not proposing to send any money to those municipalities to pick up the slack. Yeah, so this is a real struggle for me. I think if I heard one scenario where I was like, oh, this really terrible thing that would be bad for everyone would happen if this started July 1, I would be completely persuaded that September 1 is a good idea. But I just have heard concerns that are things like it will be administratively challenging, which that's real.
Do you know how many emergency shelters we have right now? How many towns have them?
That's a good question. I actually don't. I know youth shelters, the youth shelter. We have one youth shelter in Burlington. All other youth end up, if they're 18 to 24, so it's 12 to 24, unaccompanied minor youth outside of Burlington is all on a host home model. There are 14 host homes in Vermont. The 18 to 24 shelter is also considered youth shelter. Except outside of Burlington, there are none in Vermont. I just was in New York City with a bunch of people who run youth shelters, and they said that Vermont youth are going to New Hampshire and Maine shelters. There are youth shelters in Manchester and I can't remember where else in New Hampshire, Portland, Maine. But yeah, they're getting youth from Vermont and their emergency shelters. So it's beyond our state too.
Sure. Did you have your hand up? Representative Tori, then Smith.
I was curious if there are, hopeful and curious that there are shelters in the pipeline already. And that could have a bearing on the date. You know, if hopefully work is happening already. We're not starting from scratch. That there are municipalities that have anticipated this and have been making some steps. I don't know. I don't know enough about the landscape. I don't know if you could speak to that, Representative.
I think a very specific example comes to mind in thinking about the ways that zoning has impacted the expansion of emergency shelters during the current crisis that we're in. I think to Virgin's, where the community action agency there was actually offered 2 buildings from the local faith group to be able to expand the beds that they already had available to the John Graham House. And they were actually stalled in that process because of zoning to be able to expand. So these are free buildings that were going to be offered or rented to the folks at John Graham and would have added a minimum of 8 more beds for them.
Representative Smith.
Thank you. I'd ask Representative Logan a question. Are these shelters filled to capacity or overflowing, or is there still room in them?
Shelters are at capacity.
How many?
Well, for example, the youth shelters that I was referring to, Maine and New Hampshire, they're at capacity. Every day.
Burlington as well, or Vermont?
I mean, Burlington, the youth shelter in Burlington has 8 beds, I believe. And it's pretty consistently filled. And those are generally youth from all over Vermont who come to Burlington.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, our hotel program is pretty full. Shelters are full. There's just not enough housing to rent and for transitional housing available for folks.
So they're full already. It's one challenge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Other thoughts?
I have one last thought and then I swear I'm done. They certainly would not want to interrupt the committee process in any way by having an opinion on this decision that we have to make. But I did reach out to Vermont Housing and Conservation Board just to ask what the funding situation for shelter development is like. And I know a little bit about that too. We have funds to build shelters, but BHCB did inform me that they have the most money they've ever had or ever expect to have to support building emergency shelter right now. I don't have the exact details. I could probably get those for the committee if they were interested, but it seems like whatever we can do to spur that kind of development right now would be helpful. And I can't imagine anybody coming in to a municipality. Like maybe I just don't have a good imagination. And like if Karen, or somebody else could help me understand what a community member might do in a town where there are no interim bylaws in place by July 1, like what could happen that wouldn't be an illegal structure. But like I'm just not sure what people would be proposing that would certainly don't want to harm a community, obviously, by doing this.
I think another way to think about this is that we don't want communities to resent. That's another possibility here, that just give them that little bit of, we're going from a year and a half, 2 months. And I think just giving them the chance to build it into their mindset and get the bylaws done. 2 months is 2 months. I understand everything you're saying. I support everything. If I could wait one, we'd do it now. But I do just worry about municipalities feeling abused. And I know you could make a good case back to that the other way. But I think it's something we should consider. And we're talking about, again, we had it a year and a half. We're now going down to 2 months. And really saying communities scramble. And by the way, they're not necessarily going to wait until the last minute to get it done.
Right. They can start
September 1st could mean August 1st. A lot of things because we work with the RPCs and move as quickly as possible. I assume we want to make it. So I don't know. We got to, there's two and one level bad choices, which we really want to look at it. And we have to make one of them. I guess I'd still go with the two extra months to give them the time to get the interims in place.
Representative Sibilia.
Yeah, I think that we've done good work moving this from 2024. I think there's a lot that's going to happen right on July 1st. I think there's a lot of money that is coming, as you've referenced, and a lot of work that's going to happen. My sense is it's going to happen in the places that are most ready first. And there probably will be 2 minutes. And, I think for that reason, I'm okay with 2 months, Madam Chair. It's just slightly longer than 2 minutes. I think I would be okay with the September. I think it's been a really good conversation for us to have, and I expect we will continue to have conversations around it, but I'm okay with September.
Representative Stebbins.
Yeah, a lot of our towns are run by volunteers also. And I guess we do need good relationships between the shelters, the folks who live in the shelters and the communities. And for that reason, I think I would lean towards September as well.
Representative Tory.
I'm inclined to lean towards September as well, because we wouldn't want to disincentivize doing anything because it was such an unrealistic date. Like the town could just shut down the conversation right away. Is it July 1? Seeming unattainable, whereas a more realistic date would potentially encourage more will in the community, more capacity in the community.
In the post-lunch end of session lull.
Like, I'll just comment that in my town, I think if we put it in as July 1st, we're already late for the process to play out for the planning commission.
Right.
It's not going to happen by July 1st, even if we said July 1st. September, if this bill goes through, process that just puts them on notice that by September, they're going to have that something.
Further discussion? Are folks ready to vote? All right, so we have the two amendments that address this. We haven't actually presented the second one, which is September 1 date plus some of the language from Representative Sheena. Has everyone seen it? Emailed it. Sorry.
Nigel.
Yeah, Nigel. Did everyone else see it? Yeah. So either way, we're moving. I think what I'm hearing is we're committed to moving the date up. Decision is July 1 or September 1. So I guess I'm going to ask folks who are in support of the small amendment, which would move the date to July 1, to raise their hands. Okay.
I didn't get an email from Nigel. Okay, it's posted on our website.
And then all those opposed to the small amendment, knowing that we're going to replace it. So that's 1 in favor, 10 opposed.
Of course.
Right. So do folks need to hear or discuss the amendment that is under my name for S100 that moves the date to September 1st and then includes the couple of changes, the first two amendments that Representative Sheena brought us yesterday? Is there further discussion on that?
I'm prepared to vote for that. I think we had a good discussion yesterday.
Representative Logan.
Can we add the rest of the committee's names?
Can we add other members' names if they want to be added?
Yeah.
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
that is under that language that Representative Sheena.
It's not the whole thing, though.
Just the first two instances of amendment.
My name on your website?
Or 9 a.m. email.
Got Harrison, Higley, Sheldon. Oh, Sheldon.
Okay, all right. That's the underlined wording.
Great. So.
And consider.
So
Shall consider possible.
consider Possible new methods. See, okay. Yep. Me too. All right. Do members have questions on this amendment? Who would like their name on this amendment? Seeing Sevilla. Logan. Stebbins. Satkowitz. Is that a question or you want your name on it?
Oh,
Tori. And Pat. And what is your question, Representative? Tori?
well, I'm just, a clarification, and this might be for, but in Small's amendment, he didn't have section 3 reference for July 1st, and Sheldon amendment references section 3 for September 1st.
Because the whole rest of, I think, was lining up with that date.
Okay.
That's how the small amendment lined up.
Okay, I just want to
Other-
make sure we reference the right part. Okay.
Okay, so it'll be Sheldon, Bongard, Sibilia, Logan, Stebbins, Sadkowitz, Tori, and Pat. There, you got that, Ellen?
But I think okay, yeah, I'll write it down.
Keep going.
I mean, I think it's, can I just say it's the opposite, is there are 3 people that don't want to be on it?
Yes. Smith, Clifford, and Morris.
We're gonna get down to nitpicky, I'll put my name on it, yeah,
Okay, are
sorry.
you knit or
Justin, that you should
knit or picky?
be pointing out.
Right.
It's gonna be detailed.
Okay, so all those in favor of the Sheldon amendment? 9 in favor, 2 opposed. It's now, yeah, Sheldon at all. With that, we have Representative Beck Harrison, join us, please.
Thank you. For the record, Representative Scott Beck from St. Johnsbury, here with Representative Harrison. We have an amendment to section 16(3)A, Roman numeral 9. We will be offering a substitute amendment for this amendment. I'll explain what that difference is in just a second.
We don't have that yet.
No, Ellen will draft it here in just a bit. Basically, what this amendment would do would be to open up the exemption from Act 250 for 25 housing units from just designated areas to all zoned areas in the state, greatly expanding the number of towns that could participate in this, and the area in a number of towns could participate in this. Of course, assuming that the land is controlled by a single person for 3 continuous months. In my community, this would open up a lot of areas to housing to make it easier to construct housing than just our designated areas. And I represent 2 towns that have no designated areas, but they are zoned. This would make it easier for them to get some housing constructed. The substitute amendment that we will offer won't make any changes to the language that's in front of you. It will, however, add the existing language that's in Roman numeral 11, which states that if 4 housing units are put into an existing structure, that would only count as 1 unit towards the 25, and that will be the addition in the substitute amendment. So.
No, no, you did. It's the last sentence on page 1582 of your yesterday's calendar. It's for purposes of the subsection, the construction of 4 units or fewer housing in an existing structure shall only count as 1 unit towards the total number of units. I believe that's language that you folks added.
What page did you say?
1582 of yesterday's journal.
Journal.
Sorry, I'm looking at the journal.
Oh.
It gets complicated, as you folks certainly appreciate, when you have amendments and overlapping amendments of
Yeah.
in several different versions. So
Yeah, I'll just read it. It's for the purpose of this subsection, the construction of 4 units or fewer of housing in an existing structure shall only count as 1 unit towards the total number of units. So we would, in the substitute amendment, that sentence would be included onto this language that's in front of you.
Can you, I don't,
and if I may add, I know this committee spent a lot of time, a lot of work, tried to reach a delicate balance with compromise, but the reality is because of designated areas, and I'm not going to minimize that, but it's a very, very small percentage of the state that we're talking about. Some suggested less than 0.5%. And if we go to municipally zoned areas, it greatly expands the opportunity for housing development statewide. And I think it's an important consideration to hopefully help us all get through this critical shortage that we have right now.
and what's the percentage of land that this would open up?
It's estimated at 53% of the state.
Members have questions?
And these are municipal zone areas. It isn't. It wouldn't apply to my town of Chittenden because we don't have zoning. But it would apply to Mendon and Killington because they do have zoning.
I guess I'm having a hard time understanding this. Within any continuous period of 3 months, owned or controlled by a person within any continuous period of 3 months. What is that?
That's language that was in the Senate Economic Development version.
So what does that mean?
I think what it means is they're trying to avoid land speculation, I think is what they're trying.
3 months? Holding land for 3 months avoids land speculation?
I think that's what their logic was, yeah.
We might defer to ledge council because it may be not quite right.
Okay.
Representative Smith.
Sorry.
I'm open to that.
I had a question about that. It's a little confusing to me. I know you might find that hard to believe, Representative Harrison, but anyway.
That you had a question? Or?
Yes, I do. I'm getting to it. A continuous period of 3 months, exactly. Does that mean somebody can buy a piece of land? And if they own it for 3 months, this will apply to that? Am I reading that right or am I reading it wrong?
That's the way I read it.
Go ahead.
So currently under the statute, there's something that's called the 5-year, 5-mile rule.
Yep.
And so that means it counts any units towards the total that are built within 5 years or within 5 miles. The Senate was interested in removing the 5-year, 5-mile rule. However, when you remove that language fully, it becomes unclear how you count the units. And so the NRB and other attorneys had different opinions on what it meant if there was no year limit or radius limit. And so I suggested to the Senate Economic Development Committee that having a nominal time would potentially further their goal because it refers to someone that's constructing these units within a continuous period of 3 months. And so nominally, the clock on counting the units resets every 3 months. And that helps differentiate between projects because there was a difference of legal opinion between the lawyers that presented about whether or not the cap could ever be reached or would be reached, or if the cap would apply in perpetuity. So my legal advice is that there be some period of time so that you can differentiate between projects.
So this amendment will give more opportunity to build more much-needed housing in the state of Vermont.
That's our intent, certainly. Yes, we believe it will.
And so you're counting towards your 25 units resets every 3 months.
Yes.
It's hard for me to. So
We have a need, what, 30,000 units that we need to get online. This isn't going to do it, but it would certainly help.
There's definitely differing opinions on that
Sure.
projection of need and the reality of that, which Vermont has, that's a,
But we will
number.
probably all agree there's a need.
there's a need. Representative Tory.
This amendment doesn't address the sunset at all, right?
I believe it's under
It
that.
does.
It does.
Oh, it
It is,
does?
it is sunset. It is.
So the sunset applies.
Yes.
That's
So
what I meant.
I would just point out the only differences in this amendment from what is in your bill is that it changes designated areas to any town with permanent zoning and subdivision bylaws. And then it changes the 5-year, 5-mile rule to 3 months.
Representative Walker.
Well, I don't have any questions. You want questions first?
Do members have questions for Representative Harrison or Beck? Further question? Representative Stebbins.
Good afternoon. So we've heard a fair amount of testimony on this, and we did hear from housing developers and both private and public affordable general market rate. And they had all said they liked sort of the 25-5-5. And I'm wondering, did you hear from like specific developers that are wanting this to go from like the 1.5 or 3% that it currently covers to like 53%?
I mean, I will speak for myself, not Representative Beck, but, would certainly be open to amending this, but I do think having just the designated areas is really minimizing the opportunities that present us, and we need housing in every area of the state.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to any builders, but I know my communities, and this would be my 3 towns that I represent, there would be this teeny tiny area where this 25 would be in play, and the rest of them are just, they're still hamstrung with 10.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I have to be upstairs, but I appreciate your time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll do it right after this.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks.
Welcome to stay. I know there's not much going on in appropriations.
Does anybody know what time we're on the floor? 3.
Or sometime thereafter.
Yeah. Whatever the piece of paper on the podium says.
Thank you.
So I would just say what I would say. Every single it's about designated down. All measure. That's wall. And another thing is that those 2 are the main points. Another one is that it's always a little bit harder to build in downtowns because of traffic and other things. It's very easy to go outside and build. So to the extent that we were trying to get development in downtowns that help build vibrant communities, this makes it, not only does it invite sprawl, it makes it much less likely that's going to happen. Because if you can go somewhere else more easily, that's where, that is very likely where they'll go. So just to put it bluntly, this just undoes everything we've done with this bill for the last, however many months we've been working on it, or weeks we've been working on it.
Yeah, Representative Smith and Pat.
In towns with a town plan and zoning, wouldn't those two enter into this picture to keep sprawl from happening or help in keeping sprawl from happening?
Help might be a word. It wouldn't keep it from that because there's zoning, there's planning and zoning, and there is planning and zoning. And the way it actually works in different towns is very different regardless of what the rules say. And there's a reason Act 250 is there for anti-sprawl stuff. So it's
I can see something like this helping, between the Village Derby Center and the Village Derby line is about 3 miles, and there's 50, 75 acre fields along the way where 25 unit development could happen pretty easily without it entering into the word sprawl, because we've got the water and sewer infrastructure there. And this would help in a situation like that, I think.
Representative Pat.
I'm not opposed in principle to finding ways to expand the areas in towns beyond the relatively small amount of land area. But this just on the face of it seems very open-ended and with kind of no limits and definition. So it's something I think that going forward we could look at. Well, if are there other defined areas that we could put into words the definitions of, so that there will be more areas that achieve what we're trying to do now, but to a larger area. But this thing, and also this would be a very big change, and we've taken no testimony on it. And there may be people for it, and there may be people who have lots of reasons that they would oppose it, and we haven't heard any of that.
Sebelia and Morris.
So I would agree with Harrison and Beck. We need to expand the area. I think looking in areas where there's zoning is a factor that would make sense. I also think this committee and in particular our chair have worked really hard to find a balance in this moment, with a lot of work coming back to us next year on 250, despite my continued questioning if that would be productive. So I think I would not support this at this moment in this year.
Representative Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Early on, this was one of my considerations, is in thinking of my community in the downtown district and the neighborhood development areas, where we could build outside of that, or because we have areas outside that have developments. And this bill, as we passed it, is areas within those districts that are controlled by water and sewer infrastructure, and they exclude permits if they're within those areas, because there's already development there. So we're excluding the permit. So by going outside of those areas, would they not have to follow existing permit requirements? And even if there is zoning bylaws in communities, and I think that just gets too. Would they be excluded if this was to pass? Would they be excluded from having to get a permit?
So the purpose of this amendment is an exemption for 25 units from Act 250.
Over 3 months. So in 3 months, you could build 25 more.
Yes.
To be clear.
Yeah.
It's not much of a boundary.
Yeah.
Not at all.
I mean, one of the original intentions, I think, of Act 250 and the 25-5 rule is to avoid speculation and
So when I said I originally was in favor of something similar to this, this bill became narrow focused, which we taken testimony and read on the floor, et cetera. And we supported. So I would not be in favor of the amendment opening it up, because I just think that invites the construction sprawl that we were alluding to.
Smith and Stebbins.
But it still does sunset, doesn't it? There's a limited time that this can happen.
Yes.
Can we shorten this amendment to sunset time? So that it would allow at least the development where I'm from, as well as somebody on Shelburne Road.
Stebbins.
I do agree that the 1.5 to 3%, because I've heard 3%.
3%.
Okay. The 3% that this bill covers is it would be great if it was a little bit bigger. That being said, I know energy, I don't know Act 250, and I am really hopeful that we're going to have this report and study that will provide greater clarification as to where we should make further amendments or changes to that policy. And this is pretty big. I mean, 53% of Vermont, that's like, wow, that's a big on the day that we vote the bill, presumably off the floor.
Right. Representative Tory.
I'm inclined to agree with that. I'm also hoping that the changes in this bill are going to spur a lot of community thinking about planning more generally, more intentional thinking. And that process needs to happen first. So along with the capacity building that we're hoping for and the new studies, the timing's just not right to go this far.
Yeah, I would encourage all of us to remember there's actually 3 reports back studies at least, right? And lots of work to help communities start to do more proactive planning. There's a designation study by ACCD. There's the NRB study on location-based jurisdiction. And then there's the delegation work that we've asked the regional planning commissions to do, all in an effort to look at this exact topic. And that's what we've stood up and worked hard on in S100. So encourage us to stay the course. Representative Smith and
Well,
Bongard.
I hear what you mean, Chair. We have run out of time. We're running out of time. But we're also a committee that's been pushing housing like a son of a gun. I mean, push housing. And now let's not push housing here. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. We either should push housing because of the demand and the crisis that we're supposedly in, or we should just stop it altogether. And I like 30-30 and 50-30, but well, that in essence is what we're doing here. If this amendment, we can shorten the sunset on it.
Larson and Buff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the units that are described here still could be built outside those areas. They just have to go through the.
Correct. Right. And they have been all over the state. That's happened. So
Correct.
I think it's important. Thank you.
We're not preventing or eliminating housing.
Representative Bongard.
Just to add that, in addition to those 3 studies, we have $500,000 that's now in the budget. It will be in the budget that allowed for planning grants, and some of which are for bylaw modernization grants, some of which are for to help. Some of the funds are to help towns go through the process of becoming NDAs, and so which would make that whatever that percentage is be bigger, but go through the process. Actually, the representative Tory is talking about thinking it through first, and so it's the 3 studies plus the money. Last year, the $500,000 last year, and then the money, another $500,000 this year to help towns do work when they're planning to help them think all this through and get the work done. So.
All right. Guess, are folks ready? Is there further discussion? More amendment? Straw poll? No, this one. More vote on the amendment. All right. All those in favor of the Beck Harrison amendment? 2 in favor. All those opposed? 9 opposed. Great, thank you, members. Does anyone have anything else they want to talk about before we adjourn from the floor? All right, we are adjourned.